let me get this also clarified from you. You and your colleague, Richard Koshiga, went to the Supreme Court. Exactly what problem was existing that you dragged the government of this republic to the Supreme Court on?
Thank you very much. And I think that is why we are here today. Article 252 of the Constitution, which we are operating currently, you have it there, provides for this Assembly's common fund. I read 1 and 2 for you. There shall be a fund to be known as the District Assembly's Common Fund. 2. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, Parliament shall annually make provision for the allocation of not less than 5% of the total revenues of Ghana to the District Assemblies for development, and the amount shall be paid into the District Assembly's Common Fund in quarterly installments. That is the provision in the Constitution. What we have come up with is that this provision of 5% of total revenues has not been applied. Way back 1993, the government of Ghana, you see, first of all, let me establish that this is not a partisan issue.
Yeah.
It is our conviction that the Constitution is not being applied by all parliaments, from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. That is why we decided to go to court. In 1993, when the District Assembly's Common Fund law was enacted, they excluded non-tax revenues from the computation of 5%
total revenue.
Of total revenue. Total revenue was computed generally as tax revenue.
So it's only the money we get from tax that was actually deemed to be total revenue.
Even that, they would take up to 3% of that money and give to Ghana Revenue Authority. So all along, we've seen that the base for computing the money meant for this Assembly's Common Fund has never been adhered to.
I see.
And mind you, there is a difference between constitutional establishment and a legislative establishment. We passed an act to establish GET Fund. We passed what we call the ESLA. But this Assembly's Common Fund is an establishment of the Constitution. So no act can tamper with that. This is what
the Constitution, the supreme law of the country.
So yes, that's the supreme law of the country. So we cannot enact laws that will create differences between what the Constitution provides and what that law is providing. So Act 455, first of all, excludes non-tax revenue, such as minerals tax, cocoa taxes, and all that. They were not included.
The part of the revenues that the state was supposed to.
Yeah. So the bucket or the box from which the 5% was being computed was always lower than what the Constitution envisaged. Then the district assemblies, the district, let me get it clear for you. The Local Governance Act was passed to repeal Act 462. Act 462 is the Disassembly's law, which started governing these assemblies
across the country.
That also affirmed Act 455 that only the revenues described in Act 455 would be used for this Assembly's Common Fund. Then, in when we started selling oil, you see, we started making some money from there. Act 815, Petroleum Revenue Management Act, was also enacted. And in that law, it was also clearly spelled out that the District Assembly's Common Fund cannot benefit from revenues derived from oil itself and its relevant or related taxes. from oil business, oil and gas. So to add to the non-tax revenue, we've added oil revenues and oil-related tax, oil and gas-related taxes and royalties. So the bucket still went down further, even as our revenues continue to grow. Then in 2006 or thereabouts, the former President Kufuor increased the 5% because the law is, the constitution says it's not less than 5%. So he increased it to 7.5%. And we all operated this up until 2016. Then in 2017, it was brought back to 5%, apparently. But what even finally sent us to court is that the government enacted an earmarked funds capping and realignment law at 947. And they included this Assembly's Common Fund. Now, that law says that, okay, we want to cap all earmarked funds up to 25% of government revenue. Then the minister has powers to restore, if he found it necessary.
To do so.
Yes. But the error there was that they shouldn't have included this Assembly's Common Fund in that law at all. Because
provisions are made for in the Constitution.
Yes. No law can be passed to diminish the value of a constitutionally mandated provision. No.
Okay.
So, in the first instance, they capped it and then restored. So I said no. I told them at the committee that you cannot include this Assembly's Common Fund here. Whether you cap it and restore it, it is still unconstitutional. Then we had to go to court to seek interpretation. In fact, quite a number of people, that's why I told you first that it's not a partisan issue. Bipartisan. The majority leader himself was interested in testing what the Constitution means by total revenues. So in December 2017, we went to file a writ calling on the judges of the SC to tell us what exactly, yes, Supreme Court is SC, to tell us what exactly the framers of the Constitution intended that provision to mean. So it took quite a number of
years or months, of course.
About 18 months plus, you know.
Yes.
So
So you went to court.
Yes.
You went to court basically to say that, please tell us what the Constitution meant when it said that this 5% of total revenue of all the amount of money we collect in this country should be given at this Assembly's Common Fund. That's basically why we went to court.
Yes.
Okay.
You see, you can see from the computation of the Ministry of Finance, they even started from total tax revenue, not total revenue.
Okay, so they separated
so they have already excluded some.
Some which are non-tax revenue. Yeah.
So they started from total tax revenue, 34.3 million. Then oil revenue, 616 million was taken out of that. Then retention was taken out of that, which was to emphasize that they just don't want oil revenue to be included in the computation of the 5% due to this Assembly's Common. But oil revenue is growing.
Yeah.
And the assemblies need more money to operate. Also, when you have even dropped it from 7.5% to 5%, you need to include all the revenue. So we got the relief granted by the Supreme Court.
That now, what should happen specifically?
Yes, I would prefer to read to you what the court said.
Okay, now let me, I have them here too, okay, but if you want to go through it, no problem.
You have them here?
Yes, no problem at all.
Yeah. The court says total revenues of Ghana, I quote, must prima facie refer to the total revenues and monies that accrue to the central government in any given year, over which the government has a discretion as to how to apply same for its operations. Government as used here to include the legislature and not limited to the executive arm of government as defined in Article 295. So all revenues, that is what the Supreme Court is saying. Then it went further to look at the specific revenues. The first one is petroleum. The petroleum fund, after the benchmark revenue is determined, some money is allocated to GNPC. I don't want to talk about that. When we have the petroleum funds, we use 70% for annual budget funding amount. Then we have a stabilization fund between it and the heritage fund, 30%. So 30% goes to those funds, the heritage fund and the stabilization fund, and 70% comes to annual budget funding amount. The annual budget funding amount is, by this definition, that money which is made available to the government for discretionary use.
For budgetary support.
Budgetary support in the particular year. So Supreme Court is ruling by this decision that that amount, 5%, should go to the District Assembly's Common Fund.
I see. More money for the District Assemblies.
Yes.
Then.
So that is
but the District Assembly Common Fund is not a priority area under the ABFA.
They say give 5% of it to these assemblies.
So now it's 95% that's available for the priority areas.
Exactly.
I see.
Yes.
That's interesting to note.
Yes, 95% of this year it was 473 million US dollars. So 5% of that will is available to
these assemblies.
These assemblies. Then they went further to rule that revenues from all natural resources, you see, that is what it says, unless some other provision of the Constitution, not of any enactment, of the Constitution might be said to intend exclusion of a source of revenue, which is not so, we hold that the reference to total revenues of Ghana included revenues from all natural resources, including petroleum revenue.
I see. That's an interesting development there. Yes. Basically, you've gone to court and asked for more money for district assemblies.
Sure.
The Supreme Court has granted more money for district assemblies in this particular case. I'll come to you. Let me go to the phone lines and speak to George Chebafo. He's a former NALAC president. He's also a local government analyst by all standards and qualifications. He understands that particular system. Mr. Chebafo, is this good news that now we can have more money for district assemblies, mindful of the recent capping and the issues that have been set quest to do true devolution of power?
Yeah, good evening, and thank you very much for having me. I am more than excited to hear this verdict by the Supreme Court. This has been an issue on the drawing board. Some of us have advocated, on numerous occasions about it, in relation to the interpretation of the constitutional clause that determines the setting aside of a specific amount for disbursement to MMDA. You see, the point is that the Constitution is very clear and unambiguous. But you see, like elsewhere, decentralization is a kind of a struggle between, central and local government authorities in terms of control of resources and power and authority and things like that. So all the time, the executive or the central government would want to have its way. Otherwise, the Constitution clearly says that a minimum of not less than 5% of the total revenues, that's the provision, total revenues of Ghana shall be set aside. That's in Article 252.
I get your point. I have a question. Though, forgive me. That point we've made here. Yeah. Is this expected to take effect immediately? So, for example, are we expected to devote more money to the various district assemblies as we go into a review of our budgets pretty soon?
Well, what I'm saying is that government, successive governments have been shortchanging the assemblies in terms of the allocation of into the district assemblies common fund. So, if the Supreme Court has made a ruling, I believe that the ruling may have to take immediate effect.
Okay.
Because, like I said, the Constitution is clear. Set aside a minimum of 5% of the total revenues of Ghana. And when this Assembly Common Fund at 455 was being crafted, then the executive decided to make it total tax revenue.
I see.
Yes. So you realize that there was a breach of the constitutional provision from the onset. And for that matter, the assemblies have been denied the requisite resources to develop. So now, if the Supreme Court has made, a determination, I believe that it is good news for the assemblies and the National Association of Local Authorities of Ghana. We have to take this issue up and pursue it for Parliament to indeed comply, because it is Parliament that determines the quantum that is supposed to be set aside. So Parliament will have to comply with the Supreme Court ruling and ensure that indeed 5% of the total revenues of Ghana are set aside for distribution to MMC.
And I want to say I'm very grateful for your intervention on this one. Local governance analyst there, George Chebafor. I'm coming back in studio here because my guest who went to court. So now, more money for the various district assemblies. When is this money expected to reflect in the accounts of the district assemblies?
Before I come to that,
okay,
let me read the portion that relates to non-tax revenue, to be specific.
Okay.
In the light of the foregoing analysis, the portion of non-tax revenue that is paid to central government forms part of total revenues for calculating the portion due for payment into the District Assembly's Common Fund. So all, except certain funds have been created by Parliament for specific purposes, like the National Health Insurance Levy. It has been created for the purpose of sustaining the National Health Insurance Scheme. So those ones, the court excluded them.
Okay.
But where the government is going to get revenue that it will distribute in the budget to MMDAs, this Assembly's Common Fund must take 5% first before you start the distribution. You see, you asked my colleague whether it should take immediate effect. The court has given a ruling. You serve the minister, he has to implement it. The minister cannot determine when a court ruling should take effect. It's like you have...
we have a budgetary cycle. I mean, our budget cycles go through a process. We are not going to mid-year review.
The court knows.
Yes.
The court knows. It made no reference to it. The court is saying that the directive they have given should be implemented. That's all.
Okay.
It's like...
Did they give a deadline or a timeline for its implementation?
No, you don't. Okay. If you go to court and they rule that you are guilty and they jail you,
of course you go to jail.
Then you go immediately.
Yeah.
And if something happens and they say that, oh, you have been granted pardon, immediately you are released.
So what you're saying
is
that
I'm expecting
the Ministry of Finance is expected to devote more money.
Fortunately, we have mid-year review.
Okay.
The Public Financial Management Act provides for mid-year review where you can make sufficient changes in the budget for Parliament to approve. So what we should be doing quickly is to invite the Common Fund Administrator to get to the Ministry of Finance, get a revised allocation to the fund, and then bring a revised formula to Parliament for approval. That is what should be done.
Okay.
Yes, and anything short of that will amount to contempt of court.
I see.
Yes.
Are you willing to take that one up?
Oh, if they
fail
refuse
to do so.
Yes, I will go. I will go and ask the court to order the implementation of their ruling.
Now, this is an interesting development. This assemblies up until now were complaining about not so much funds being made available to them for their many projects. Some have said that the things that these assemblies are supposed to do are being done by the Special Development Initiative, providing ambulance, providing water facilities, providing boreholes, providing dugouts, dams, and all of these other things. Don't you think you are denying central government of requisite funds to ensure holistic development rather than the assemblies who are known to dissipate the funds anyhow?
It is for this very reason that the government is seeking to cap funds, including the constitutionally established DACF. Who is best suited to build a toilet? Is it the central government that will build a toilet in my constituency? When you say 1 million, a constituency, $1 million, who is best suited to know what use
determine the needs of the people.
Yes, it is the assembly.
But I don't know why they submit their composite budget.
To who?
So to the central
just
government.
For information. Just for information, so that they can monitor the processes through the gift means. So the assemblies must have access to these funds. The $1 million for each constituency, give it to the assembly which is hosting that constituency. If there are 2 constituencies within one assembly, like the Keta municipality, give the 2 constituencies money to Keta municipality. And then they will determine how to apply the money to the benefit of the people. But when you sit in the castle, in your special initiative, you say you are going to build 3 toilets in whole municipality. You are going to build a warehouse in whole municipality from that $1 million. What are you telling me? What are you telling me that the whole municipality cannot plan for its area?
I've read some of these reports from the Auditor General about how districts abuse money and all of that. We are not going to be able to ensure that they don't abuse this money, are we?
What about other agencies which are not in the districts? The national agencies.
Yeah.
When they blow one deal, it's more than
how much the districts are getting. Okay.
It's far in excess of what the districts are getting. So that one, you see, it's like because of death, you will not sleep.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
Yes, because people are likely to misapply money, so you won't give it to the assembly. That is not proper reasoning.
Honorable, congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us today on this particular matter.
Just before we wind up, there are other legislations which
are equally problematic.
Yes, like the National Youth Authority Bill, NADMO, and Youth Employment Agency.
Are you going to call on this one too?
They are all feeding on the District Assembly's Common Fund, up to 16.5% every year. I think this must also be looked at. Before anybody goes to court, the respective ministers should bring to Parliament amendments to take away these things, so that this Assembly's Common Fund will not be encumbered. Okay. Yes, the full money must go to the assemblies as anticipated by the Constitution of Ghana. That is our target.
Honorable, I'm pleased you joined us here today. Many thanks to you folks for joining us on this day's edition of Upfront. Thank you so much.